John, this is the Global Digest think tank group. You can introduce to our audience where you right now and what you are doing. So let the people know more about you. Please, Sharon.
Okay, so thank you, John, for the quick introduction. My name is, let's move a little bit from light. My name is Elad Sharon. I a former Israeli, live now in Toronto, Canada. Been here for about 14, 15 years. I run a real estate investment company and a consulting company that manages projects in heavy industry and chemical and metal processing. My background is mostly finance and consulting, and that's my world. I'm a father of 2 girls, which I think is very relevant and kind of.
No, it's fine, Sharon. You good family, I hope. And
yeah, it's an interesting life, right? It changes how you see things.
How's your company? Can you a little bit explain us what kind of financial you are doing locally or internationally?
No, so we work with global clients. We work with large manufacturers around the world that deal with processing of metals. So when we talk metals and chemicals, when we talk about processing, it means taking either material and recycling it to a different material that other plants can work with, or actually preparing material for others to process into a product. So we don't do product manufacturing, but we do metal processing. So if someone wants to create a new material, a new chemical compound or anything else, they usually come to us for an advice. What we do is we provide them with what we call tactical business advisory. We help them understand and solve business problems or business needs by helping them implementing more technical solutions. So changing in their production line, changing in how they run logistics, changing in how they organize their organization. And we do to relatively larger companies all around the world. Our company has individuals that are all executives from the industry with like 15, 20, 30 years experience, with a very significant network of other experts. And we're trying to bring all of this together so people can find solutions to problems they don't necessarily know how to do. That's most of our activity.
Around the world, usually from which country you are dealing with companies?
We're dealing with American companies. We're dealing with European companies, French, German. We deal with Taiwanese, Japanese, Korean, Chinese. We deal with a diversity of companies. We have a few companies in the Middle East. So there's a lot of activities.
You said about chemical, manufacturing or something. Only you're doing related to chemical. What about other items, other products?
We do chemical and metals. So I'll give you example: recycling of lead, zinc, creating all kind of acids and other production chemicals. What else we came across? Filtering systems for someone that wants to create new processing. I can't go into very specific details, but in general, that's how we
Sure.
That's how we approach it. Yeah. We
What
invest
kind of financial involvement.
We invest in certain companies, but these are smaller investments. We don't provide financial support. We provide them with financial background or business cases that they can go then and borrow money if they need. We also work with some banks, etc. But it's most of our activities either we invest directly or we provide them with the instruments they need to go back and seek the financials they need.
So you invest financially to many companies around the world.
Yeah, mostly in North America. Mostly in North America and smaller organizations, but yeah, that's our second part of our activity.
I see. Investment is second, but first one is you give a kind of advice, consulting. So
Correct.
usually company, what kind of consulting they ask you?
So we do a very, very wide range, but usually clients come to us with a problem around something is not working in their business. They want to increase production. They want to enter a new market. They would like to diversify their portfolio of products. These are good examples that we come across. Or they want to get out of the business. They want to know if it's the right time or not the right time. And then we look at the full business image and we decide, or we provide them information on what's the best strategy that we know of that can help them go through this. Then we try to stay away from the classical management consulting area. That's not our expertise. We try mostly to take it down one notch lower and see what's in the world we know they can use to actually make things better.
So usually Korea, Japan, you also said what
Correct.
service you help them in Asia.
The same thing. It's the same. It doesn't matter wherever you are in the world. It's the same problems. Our Korean suppliers or Korean clients have, different specific needs. Some of them around growth to other locations. Some of them have to do with their internal processes, and we no different than anyone else. They all just want to do better.
Right. Between Canada, China, there was a conflict, several years ago. They have in exchange arresting each businessman and some diplomat. Those things, government are unable to solve or disagreement between Canada and China. Even the leader, Chinese president and Canadian prime minister, they are not smoothly conversation. They have a kind of a hesitate to talk. What is the main issue between Canada and China since that time, maybe 2 years, 3 years ago, and till today, they did not have any settled down, right? Trade problem or anything.
I'll tell you what we see in a more macro level. What we see over the past few years is there is a lot of, the economics is cyclical. Everything is a cycle, right? Everyone opens up and everyone closes up, doing bigger and smaller. What we find is over the past few years, there has been a significant mistrust from a trading perspective or political perspective between North America and China. The reliance on Chinese production, what happens over the past, I would say 30 years or 20 years, a lot of the production moved from North America to China or to the East. And a lot of the capabilities were lost here. And what happened is North Americans, Canadians and Americans found out that they no longer have the ability to produce the quality and the product that the Chinese, and they're very dependent on China for everything.
Right.
And over the past, I would say 4 or 5 years, and a lot of it involved even the Trump administration, there was a big push to take things out of China and bring them back to North America, and even at the cost of production being more expensive. There was this understanding here that if they don't bring things back to here, the reliance on Chinese put them in a very inferior political position. And there is a big push to move things here. So we see in our world a lot of plants, a lot of factories, a lot of producers. Everyone is trying to diversify their business and no longer trust on China as a sole source. Even Eastern companies, even companies that come from Southeast Asia, no matter what market, looking now for certain outlets in North America and certain suppliers and certain outlets to even sell, because they realize that A, you can't rely on Chinese as an entity because it's just has its own motivation, and B, if the Chinese economy go through a down point, you must have other routes. And I think what happened is Canada in specific has been relying on the Americans for most of its trade. Most of its trade goes to the US. I think that's a big mistake that they've done over the years, not to diversify into larger and other large markets like India or China, but that was mostly a political driven decision. And I think it was easier for the Canadian to realize at that point that with the tension there is, they have to look into other avenues. And we see this today. There's a lot of investment and government supported investment in Canada around plants and capabilities that before were always outsourced to different markets.
But I mean, it means in manufacturing in China, usually it have advantage for Canadian to get very lower price compared to Canada. That the price is much benefit. There is no doubt. But as you said, mistrust, distrust on China, mainly for political point of view, or also including economic point of view, because you already have cheap, lower price.
Price is not everything, though, right? Price is only one factor in the whole equation. I came across numerous clients that told me, I don't mind paying a little bit more, I need control. Control is a factor. There's certain things that people look for.
Example of controlling.
So for a lot of things, right? It's controlling, it's timing, it's priorities. The Chinese, and rightfully so, are a big enough market to grow their own market. They don't necessarily need to support the whole world. And their priorities is to make China bigger. I totally understand them. And I think the rest of the world needs to make sure that they have the independence to do things. And I'll give you a good example. I think COVID provided a very good, clear evidence of like the little things that if you can make yourself, you have a problem. Masks, gloves. If you don't know how to make rubber material or latex or other very simple products, you have a problem. And it doesn't matter how much it costs. You have a problem because when things happen, you don't have the independence to control your own public. And I think that was a very strong moment for the economies here to understand it's not enough to make it cheaper. You also need to be able to have control over what you're doing. And I think that was a critical pivot point for both sides. And it's in other places as well. You see, I see it in metals and chemicals as well, but it's everywhere. But again,
right,
we see it not only with North America. We see a lot of companies move to Vietnam, for example, because Vietnam seems a much more neutral ground to move to, and something they still have control over.
It's more easier to control in Vietnam, smaller country.
I don't know if it's necessarily easier. I think it's I think people perceive Vietnam as a more independent state than Chinese. Chinese are very well controlled. The Chinese government is doing a very good work at controlling what's happening. Then you see a very uniform status, right? You see a lot of all the businesses are conforming to a certain standard, and you at some point, if you're not comfortable with this standard, you can look for an outlet out, and the way to do it would be what's the best I can find. And I find that Vietnam today became very attractive to a lot of investors since it is not Chinese.
I mean, politically, they both are saying communists, it's very much state control business.
100%
control.
Which is good.
What made different in Vietnam?
It's not China, right? I mean, Chinese have their own interests. It's not about communism and per se. It's more about Chinese have their own interests and their own seek for their own power and position and greatness, which is totally part of their growth. Vietnam is not there yet. Vietnam is a small country. It's a very different.
Which means you want to say the behavior is different between Vietnam and China, because China.
The strategy is different.
Yeah, yes, strategy also, and because China also become bigger, and their movement is. They cannot move easily, and they become more expensive way behavior, or they want to become like boss. They don't want to be
100%. Yeah.
So
they're a powerhouse now, right? They feel their power, they see their influence, right. And they need resources to get there, and they will do anything, just like the Americans or anyone else. They would do anything in their power to build up this capability.
Right.
It's not always in the best interest. I'll give you an example. Taiwanese companies are very worried right now because Taiwanese companies are seeing a threat coming from China and they don't know what's going to happen in the next 30 years.
Why do you think?
Why? I think China mentioned more than once their interest in taking over Taiwan. And I think the world is in such a position where they can't really offer Taiwan the protection they used to offer, 20 years ago. There's too many conflicts and the world is in a very unstable situation, as you can see in many parts of it. So some companies in Taiwan might feel that, this threat is more real than it was 20, 30 years ago. Well, it's true or not, I don't know, but it's enough for some companies to say, hold on, should I look at other areas? Should I, move my operation somewhere else? Should I have a way out? I don't see the future, but I can understand the dynamics of how the world is moving. We had few good years, and I feel like we're going into some few bad years, especially politically. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you see such big conflicts in the Middle East and in Europe, and I think you're going to see it more in Asia. It's the nature of the cycle.
But Canada is not Taiwan. It's much, Canada has much freedom and independence and more capacity than Taiwan. China can not influence any political in Canada like Taiwan. So, I mean, Canada can do much thing, but why they are disagree and mistrust? I mean, Taiwan case is reasonable because they have trade them politically and, no guarantee for their future. It's not safe, we can say, but not Canada.
I think it's a very valid point. I think the point is Canada is not truly an fully independent country like most of the world. They belong to a sector. They belong to a sector of countries, right? They rely and depend on certain agendas, mostly American agenda. The reliance of the Canadian economy and policy and safety is all on the American. Think what happens. I know it sounds like a dream, but think what would happen if the Americans one day decide to invade Canada. They can. There's no the Canadian doesn't have the military or the ability to withstand such a situation. So the reality is there's a very strong relationship between Canada and the US and interdependency on each other.
Right.
And I think that when the Americans feel that there is a bit of stress or pressure coming from a certain sector, it definitely has significant influence on the Canadian side to take side. And I think our government here hasn't been smart enough or sophisticated enough to find a path between, and they took a very strong position. It's very similar to what they did with India not long ago, that put them in a very clear hostile position. And I think that tension, you know how it is, it's a cycle, right? So it's a ball. So the tension just creates more and more barriers and more struggles. And then you say, okay, I have all this issue, I better take care of myself. I can't rely on anyone else. There is a lot of wonderful Chinese people living in Canada. There's if you think of it, there's really no tension between the countries, but I think they both had to take kind of a side, if you would like, and say, I belong to this group or I belong to this group. And then, when you belong to a group, you have to satisfy the group's agenda.
Right. So definitely Canada will be side with USA, America.
Sure.
They are a kind of almost same country in same group in economic or political arena. So
Correct.
definitely Canada will side with USA. Do you mean the past 2-3 year tension or distrust between Canada and China it's because Canada is affected by America because of that influence Canada behavior also, different. I mean, they have to follow America. That's why the mistrust increase or is influence against China?
Sorry, I think I'm not sure. I need to think how I put it, but it's definitely the choice to be more American NATO state definitely affect Canada's decisions as to do we take a Chinese position, take American position. I will say this way: if any time there will be a conflict between China and the U.S., the Canadian will take the American side. Is there exactly is there a pressure from the U.S.? I don't know how great this pressure. I'm sure there is, but I don't know. But I'm assuming that because of the affiliation, because of the similarities, because of the so much in common, it is very natural for Canadians to stand by American agenda versus a Chinese agenda. And I think at some point they will have to make a decision, right? China is growing. Do we want to stay Americans? Do we want to share? I don't know, but for now, it has been a very North American position.
So usually, maybe American is from they are more vocal on liberal democracy and more free society, and they sometimes they don't like much the people in America. They don't like much communism and socialism. Increasing
Honestly,
or develop. They want to a little bit distance from them, communism and socialism. That will be also affecting geopolitics and any trading or commercial thing. In whatever happened in USA, that also extend to the Canada. It's like that.
you know what? I'll tell you the truth. I think people overestimate the importance of a type of governance in countries' relationships. And I'll say it in a different context. The war between Israel and the Palestinians has nothing to do with religion. Not religion. People use it as religion because it's easy for people to stick to it and think, oh, it's a religious war. Who do I belong to? Am I Muslim? Am I Jewish? Who do I affiliate myself with? It's nothing to do with religion. It's a power game. It's the same as here. Do you think they care about people that walk on the street, the public? Do you think they care if there's a different country ruling communism? We already know that democracy is nice, but not that great. It has a lot of flaws. No one has the illusion anymore that there is good and bad. There's this way and the other way. Chinese do great things because they're effective communism. The Americans do good things because they're effective capitalist democratic state. It has both advantages. I don't think that makes a big difference at the bottom line.
But you did not see market economy is based upon democracy, Market mean based on the people. If you have more people interest, people purchase, people base, which means your market is bigger.
Exactly.
So it's not the market capitalism is related to democracy, not communism.
No, but I think communism has proven to be very effective in certain approaches to things, right? The ability of China to do certain projects or move certain things is something that you will not be able to do here. An example, like I'll give you a very simple example. In Toronto, if you want to dig a subway, it's 10 years of just legal arguments because every little homeowner doesn't like the fact there's a subway under their house. It takes 20 years to build a subway. In China, you want to build a subway, you build a subway. If someone has issue, they either pay them compensation and send them away, or send them away. The ability of a communist government to make changes is much easier than the democracy. And again, there are pros and cons. I think that Canada is more American in nature. Not maybe it appears because they're more democratic and they prefer that side versus socialism. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a factor. I think it's more a factor of a risk management and think what's going to happen the next day, what culture is closer to mine, which one feels more like me, and which one possesses bigger threat on my cultural essence down the road more than, are they democratic? Canada has some very strong socialist I always call them almost communist elements to them.
I see.
And so it's not necessarily that. It's more, who do I feel closer to? Who looks like me? Who feels like me? Who speaks my same language? It's, you know, it sounds funny, but that's usually how people connect, not necessarily by what is in my best interest in the long run.
Right. You said sometimes the authoritarian system, communist system can do easy cut, development for a short time. But definitely that is not good for people. They have to destroy their houses, and a lot of people will be suffer human rights violation, even they don't pay compensation in worst case. Same in North Korea, it's not successful. They have power, authoritarian they do, but it's not always the case. Maybe sometimes it's good for shortcut development, but there are many, if you see the dark side of China, there are many, bad things, and many ordinary innocent people
I
also
agree.
suffer and difficulty. So as you mentioned, U.S. is now supporting in Middle East Israeli government, and you said there is no related to religion. So Canada also say follow U.S. to support Israeli government, or they support Arab country or Muslim country? How Canadian government position?
If you ask here, so if you ask my opinion, I think countries like to make big statements, but at the end of the day, the reason why countries do what they do is because, especially in democratic states, they want to get reelected. It's all driven by the next election. If the Americans would have known that the most of their public is interested in the Palestinian interest, then they would be more Palestinian supported. There is a very strong perception in the US of Israel as a representation of the Americans in the US. Israel has been a very strong ally to the Americans, so they're naturally inclined to stand by Israel's side. Canada is a bit different because Canada is in a weird position. There is a very strong immigration to Canada from a lot of Muslim-oriented countries, and Muslims by natural bias tends to lean more towards the Palestinians. So Canada trying to find itself this path between, not infuriate their voters, but also to take the same side as the Americans. And I think they make a lot of mistakes with it because they find themselves not doing this and not doing that, not knowing where to draw the right line. But these are governments. At the end of the day, the structure here is very different politically and demographically, and also the fact that Israel has much longer ties with the States than Canada. However, if you would have had a more conservative government in Canada, you would have probably seen a much stronger Canadian support to Israel. So just showing you how fluidic it is. It's the same thing, just a different government will make a very different statements. The government right now in Canada is extremely socialist. It's on the very extreme left side, and they naturally lean towards more of the Palestinian side. But again, I mean, I wish countries would have the ability to say, I'm not black or white, I'm not Israeli or Palestinian, I'm neither. I can see the virtue of this, I can see the virtue of this, this is right, this is wrong on both sides. How do I help you get together to a better, safer place? Unfortunately, most countries just take advantage of these conflicts and just they use it to make their position and to take sides because it serves some internal interest, not because they really care about what the outcomes are.
How is the economy between Canada and Israel?
It's good. It's small. There's not a lot of activity between Canada and Israel. Israel is very similar to the Americans in how they operate, economically, businessy. Less Canadians. Canada is a very resource-driven country. It's a lot about excavating material and selling it. Israel is more of a service-oriented country. There is much more high-tech and technology coming from Israel, which is more of an interest to the Americans than the Canadian. So there is some trade, but it's not that significant. It's not.
Do you see Israeli play big economic role, international economic role?
If I think Israel is playing a major role,
Yes, international economy.
the answer is I think Israel has created a lot of wealth in a lot of countries. I'll say differently. Israelis have done very well around the world in all kind of companies, but at the end of the day, the output, the Israeli output from a global perspective is not significant. It's a more of an internal economy. They satisfy themselves, they grow, they build their own internal capabilities. There's not a lot of, I would say, dependency on Israel from economic perspective. If Israel disappeared tomorrow, not much would happen from an economic perspective.
But Canada doesn't need a lot of oil from Middle East, from
It's true.
Arab
It's true.
countries. They have their own resources, massive of oil. So, do you think how Canada engagement, economic engagement in Middle East, how it will be more with those Muslim country, or they will not engage with them?
I think there's a lot of good relationship between Canada and some of the Arab countries. A lot of good relationships, and for a good reason. I think the specific conflict between Israel and the Palestinian is very hard to untangle because it's a very complicated conflict. And I think everyone is struggling as to their involvement and how they best serve this. I think there's a lot of emotions there globally, so it's kind of a weird situation. If you think of it, look at the Malaysians make opinions about it. What do you have to do with it? Yet they feel very affiliated. And the world was able to create that affiliation on both sides. Israelis were able to pull in people that are more supporters, and the Palestinians did the same thing. So it's a very emotionally driven thing. I don't think any of the states, neither Canada or the US, is really dependent on the Middle East, especially not Canada. I don't see a lot of dependency, a lot of trade, which is great, but I don't see a lot of dependency. I think they more try to stay away from this hot potato. They don't want to deal with this potato because, it's a weird potato.
Maybe most US, Canada rely on Israel also geopolitical issue about trade route, because Red Sea and those Arabian Sea are always, hijacked and attacked by gang and arms group. That Israel protect a lot, right? Israel involvement, those safety of shipping line and all these things. It's also important role, right?
It is definitely important role. I think one of the biggest role Israel is playing, because of its location. I think the long-term history that they had with the Americans, I think the Americans see that as an outpost that is very strongly American. And I think they don't want to lose this outpost to the Chinese or the Russians or any other powerhouse, which they would consider a threat. And it's possible. I can tell that Israel for a few years was relying on China heavily on infrastructure and development. There was a lot of Chinese involvement in Israel. And at some point, the Americans woke up and says, hold on, stop. This is not in our interest. They definitely see that. And I think that's part of the reason. And I think, the Chinese see that, and they take more of a more of an Arab-oriented policy. So you can see how those powerhouses the conflict is not the issue for them, or the status is more of how do we establish ourselves in that environment in the most influential position, and who are those places that require our support the most. So it's hard to really understand every state's position because it's so complex. But I think at the end of the day, the American sees Israel is a very comfortable place to settle mentally, not physically, because you can send their cruisers there, and they speak the same democratic language, and there's same rules. It's British system. There's a lot of similarities
Right.
that makes Israel very reliable for the Americans. They know they can rely on Israel to stand by the US for a long term, which it's not always the case with other countries. Americans are always the most important thing for the Canadian. Americans take most of the trade with Canada. So China is second, but most of the trade is American. This is the biggest reliance. Whatever
Well,
happens in the US affects the Canadian immediately.